All right, and I'm back. Welcome back to Lockbox Lunatics. I'm Steve Lambert up here in the great state of Washington, along with my co-host.
Chad Kamp in Chandler, Arizona. Steve, glad to have you back. I know we had a late fill-in for you last week. I know you had a
Yeah,
great golf outing, which took a turn for the worst. Um,
it
Glad to
got a
have you
little
back.
funky. Got a little funky, but I'm glad that Tammy could fill in and take care of that and talk about important things that need to be talked about when you are a CPA and you're an independent contractor.
That's right. Yeah,
Those things are necessary. They are necessary.
they are. So here's the thing is, there's no tax on tips, right? So I've got this harebrained scheme,
I love
right?
it.
So how about our compensation? We term that tips.
I'm super fine with that. I'm absolutely fine with that. What? Hey, I fill out an agreement on there. What is your commission? My commission is 0%. I work on tips, and since
Right.
tips are now 100% tax free, I work on a whatever X dollar tip. I think you're onto something with that. I think that could go
Yeah.
crazy. I think that could go nuts. I'm super down with that. I give it 18 months before the federal government changes that law, and they'll blame it on realtors. I
Well,
think that's phenomenal, though. It makes
well,
sense.
you do know that in a former life, I was a revenue officer, right? Field revenue officer.
Yes, you've told me about this, and you've
Yes.
had some pretty wild encounters as a result
Oh
of
yeah.
that. I think that's so let me ask you then, how has that former role helped you being a real estate agent?
Oh, okay. So here's the thing: is whenever I was enforcing the statutes, I actually got to learn that they interpreted them by the letter of the law. Normally, yeah, there were some
Okay.
cases out there.
Yeah.
So I went up against a lot of folks that were always trying to, find that loophole. And so
Yeah.
I, I've seen some guys that were successful. I've seen some folks that were not, right? And so some of that is from, I do everything legally. I just want Mr. IRS agent, everything legal, right? Within the law, the letter of the law. But yeah, no. So a lot of that has to do with record keeping, really, because when you come in from I was never an auditor. I came in after the auditor. But realistically, I came in and I set the audits up to like whenever we were doing anything criminally, pursuing anyone from a criminal perspective. But
Yeah.
making sure that that paperwork is in order, to support what you're claiming. I had a conversation with one of my agents the other day, and he's somewhat of an EA like Tammy is, but he's not really active. And so we were discussing mileage. Uh,
Oh, okay.
and he thought that he could just, record the miles at the end of the year, in December, and then as well in January, and, or January to December, and just take them all. That's like, there's supposed to be contemporaneous records for that. And it reminds me of probably one of my first gentlemen that I chased. He was out of New River. New River is a tax protester haven. And he provided, mileage that he was putting, that he was claiming. And so you learn not to ask a question you don't already know the answer to. Okay.
Ah, yeah.
So
Okay. Okay.
sometimes the questions are legitimate, and then sometimes you've got to give them enough rope to hang themselves, is what we would say, right?
Oh boy. Yeah.
So I asked, okay, so you claimed that you had 20,000 in miles for this year, correct? Yes. Okay. And you didn't use any other vehicles to drive for work. It was strictly, this your vehicle. Yes, no other vehicles. Okay. And you're positive that you've got the mileage right and you've got supporting documentation for that. Yes, I've already given you some of that. Yeah. So, Mr. Taxpayer, you showed that when you started the year, you had, 100,000 miles on your vehicle. When you ended the year, you had 112,000 miles on the vehicle. And you said you drove 20,000 miles for work. Can you explain why your vehicle is only reflecting 12,000 miles?
Because part of the time they reversed.
You drove in reverse, or
I
you
mean,
said
seems like a legitimate answer. I
well, he was
drove
he,
in reverse.
he was a mechanic,
I was
and
expecting somebody to say that actually.
yeah,
I'd be like, yeah, I'm totally caught. Let's see if I can get away with this. Well, I
Yeah.
sometimes I would drive backwards.
Yeah. So I mean, he
Doesn't
could
work that way,
have
buddy.
said
Doesn't work that way.
he could have said he reset the odometer, right? But long story short, we got him for tax evasion on so many other issues. That was
uh,
just a minor offense.
it's kind of funny because we see that a lot in real estate, right? No shortcuts in paperwork, man. That'll
Yeah.
get you in trouble. No shortcuts in paperwork. No shortcuts in marketing. There's no shortcuts. Period. You just can't
No.
do shortcuts. I mean, you
No.
might get away with one here and there. Long term, ain't gonna. It's not like not good for your career. Not a good thing at all. Um,
Right.
that's interesting though. Yeah, it's kind of funny because I would say you ran into some really interesting people, and you had some really interesting instances where you had to kind of learn how to assert yourself, right? Stand your ground. So
Hmm.
it's a lot of good training for what we deal with in real estate. The one thing I love that you said though is that typically giving people enough latitude or giving them enough space to go ahead and kind of incriminate themselves, right? It's kind of interesting. Some of the worst negotiating I've seen when I'm talking with agents is that they over articulate what's going on, and I don't mean that, and I don't mean that when you present an offer that you don't do a thorough job, but what I mean is by providing so much information, then over explaining to where they get themselves stuck into a like basically potentially giving away their clients, cards a little bit, right? I've seen that before. That seems to happen on occasion. So that's kind of interesting though. Do you ever
Yeah.
miss that line? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
There are some days. When I was doing it, it was fun. We had a blast. There's lots of stories. And then upper management changed, leadership, at the state level changed. I went over to the city, and at the city was horrendous. Talk about very political, and I won't get into that, but that's one of the reasons that helped push me out was some issues that came up that, it was a moral dilemma that was presented with my.
Yeah, I got
And
you.
so I went to my supervisor and said, "You've got me for one more year. I'm going to go ahead and start doing real estate full time."
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and
Well, that's
so yeah, well, because I had been doing some real estate, part time for a while, and I was pretty consistent at that point with what I was doing on a part time basis. And so my prior broker at that time had pulled me into the office. He was switching some things up and he said, "Hey, why are you working part-time?" I'm like, "Well, because, I'm only doing, I think I was averaging 6 to 8 transactions a year." I said, "Because I'm only doing 6 to 8 transactions a year." He's like, "You realize you're in the top 10% of my salespeople."
all
And he
right.
had, he
It's
had
interesting, huh?
yeah, he had 350 agents. I'm like, "Well, that's kind of sad to say.
Wow.
I don't know if that's something to brag about, right?"
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, me working part-time. Now, I will say this though, is you'll have agents that talk about working part-time or working in their business, and they're doing busy work. They're not putting their attention on the productive things.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I was going to say, so this is kind of cool because we were kind of like just wandering down a little bit of a road today on
Right.
topics, and you hit on something here that's kind of cool. So, what do you think? Because I've got a couple agents that have jobs and they do real estate, quote unquote, part time, right? And they want to be full time. Um, what did you and they're not doing, they're doing a couple deals, right? So, like I said, 6 to 8 that's actually, believe it or not, people that are not involved in real estate full
Yeah.
time and don't eat, drink, breathe, and live real estate, doing 6 to 8 deals for a lot of realtors is a really good year. So, it's not what a lot of people think. What did you do to do that many deals while you were working a full time job? What do you think it was that allowed you to be able to do that?
Knowing what productive activities truly were.
Okay, kind of like what you were just referencing, spinning your wheels or spending time looking busy versus actually doing something. So what are some of the things that people do to look busy that are not productive?
They attend a lot of training.
Yep.
So they're always in training, which, don't get me wrong, training is extremely important, right?
Yeah.
You always need to improve your skill set. But if you would, I was doing part-time and I committed to putting 20 hours a week into real estate. If I was doing 15 hours in training, I would have
Yeah.
not have gotten where I was. So I literally probably did 1 to 2 hours worth of quote unquote training on average a week. And so most of our training classes last 2 to 3 hours. So I would only go to some sort of training maybe once a month, once every 6 weeks. But those
Yeah.
activities, I was fortunate enough. My mother was in real estate for 15 plus years at the time. And so she
Okay.
really took me under her wing and gave me direction as to, hey, time management, especially for you, is extremely important. You've got your job, you've got your family. I was involved in some ministries with our church. And you really need to make sure that the time you're spending is what would create transactions,
Yeah.
right?
High impact time, right? And I
High
talk to our
impact.
agents about that when you're looking at what you're going to go out and do for the day. And I always tell them, I'm like, think of a needle on a clock, right? Think of a hour hand, whatever it is, but or a gas gauge or whatever it is that you want. But in order to move the needle, which is going to move your business, what type of activity you're going to have that you can do during the day. And if you have another job, whether it be one thing or two or three things that you can actually effectively do, but to move that needle forward, what is it going to do for you to go, if you do X activity, but like, what's the impact going to be on your potential for business? And then do you need more immediate impact because you are part-time? Do you need something that's probably going to move the needle a little bit quicker, right? Because you're in a truncated time frame, so you need to have, like, how do you measure that, and what do those activities look like? And I see the same thing, so many different agents and brokers spending time doing a lot of extraneous training. And I think the training is very, very good, and I'm not going to knock that, but it's almost like they make a professional career or career out of going to training. And I'm like, when do you have time for business if you're constantly training? When are you prospecting? You're constantly, if you don't have time to prospect, you're not finding clients. And so because you can train till you're blue in their face, but I believe there's also a good semblance of actually doing in this business with a mentor, right? Having
Right.
somebody to actually give you guidance, such as us as designated brokers, when we have our new agents come to us and they get in the middle of a deal. We walk them through it step by step and we hold their hand through that process to make sure it's done properly. But to me, that's the best training in the world right there, because you're in it,
Mhm.
and it's
Yeah.
and there's a reward at the end if you do everything right and take care of your client and you handle it well. And there is a proliferation in our industry of a lot of realtor related events where I feel like it's just a lot of realtors and agents just kind of high-fiving each other about being agents, and I'm
Yeah.
trying to figure out what it's doing to actually grow their business. And so it's because I've been to a lot of them, and it is kind of interesting. And not that I don't think we shouldn't interact with our colleagues and get to know people and have some camaraderie. I'm all for that. But I think if you in the situation where you had a full-time job like you did and you're doing these deals on the side, you do have to be really judicious with your time in terms of how you are um, spending it, right? And what's going to
Right.
be that impact. So what were some of the highs? So we talked about training. Training is not a bad thing, and by all means, I don't want
No,
people to get the
no.
impression we're saying it's a bad thing, but there's limits to it, right? What do you think were some of the things that you did that had good impact for you, that actually did move that needle?
It was from a planning, a planning perspective. There again, time management is huge, and sticking to that. But I focused on my sphere of influence.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
So I think 2 weeks ago we kind of had in our podcast we had talked about agents being secret agents, right?
Yeah.
Being in the
Yeah.
witness protection program is I think what the thumbnail was, right? And
Yep.
so
Yeah.
so many agents they think that they're in the the secret service or whatever. They don't tell their sphere of influence out of either they don't know how to approach it or they're just out of fear. What are they going to think? And one of the biggest obstacles you're going to run into as an agent, you're going to face it no matter what. And this is no matter what you get involved with, you're going to have naysayers.
Yep.
So you're going to have someone say you're not going to be able to do that because of XYZ, right? You've got to put that out of your mind, So you have to visualize that you're going to be a full-time agent or you're going to have whatever sales. You need to vocalize that to folks, right? And then once you're able to do that, then you start putting steps into place to be able to accomplish that. Very first thing I did was got set up with a newsletter, a monthly newsletter. So very consistently,
Mm,
my monthly newsletters went out. And I did this because it was the cheapest way for me to hit as many people as possible. And so
that
I
makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and I could create the newsletter at night, 9, 10 o'clock at night or whatever, sitting around with my wife watching a TV show or whatever. And so that was one thing I was very, very consistent with. That was the first thing that I got squared away to make sure that I could at least start letting people know that I was in real estate. And then after that, it was a funny cycle. And the reason it was 6 to 8 is because I would work with a client, find a house because I was doing a lot of buyers back then. Work with a buyer, find a house, 30-day close. So 2 months have passed. Now I'm back on the hunt for another client.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's learning how to fill in and be consistent, right?
Yeah, yeah. And so that newsletter realistically helped get my message out because let's be honest, when I was helping folks look for homes, my schedule allowed me afforded me to have most of Fridays off as well as
Hmm.
Saturday and Sunday. And so that allowed me to have time when most of my clients were available to look at homes.
Yeah, which is nice,
Yeah,
Yeah, you made yourself available and you did it in a way of still working around, but you were also present even though had another job going on because your newsletter, right, allowed you to have that presence. And it's interesting because we talk about like digital. There's so many different marketing platforms, right? You have digital and you have static, and static, as I'm referring
right.
to, like the pieces in the mail, right? And the cool part about it is that static mail still has a really big impact. Everybody does still, a lot of people still think like that digital is just the end all be all, and it does have a place, don't get me wrong, but that static mailer showing up is still has a massive amount of impact, which is wild to me, right? Because it's one of the tried and true things of people like to have something tangible. They want to have something they can hold, touch. They want something physically in their hands, that it's so visceral. um it's cool that you did that because, like I said, it gave you an extra level of presence when you couldn't be there, that for them to remember you. So that's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
From your perspective, what is one piece of advice you can give the struggling part-time agent as far as either the encouragement or direction or advice
Hmm.
to help
Boy,
them out?
I'd say, write down activities they like to do. Because there's going to be activities they don't like to do. I could tell them, I could say, hey, cold call people, go knock on doors. Well, I don't like that. I don't like that. So you brought up something before, which is fear. Fear stops a lot of people from doing a lot of things, right? Because they're fearful of the rejection instead of, or maybe fearful of the success. I don't know. But fear
Right.
stops a lot of people. And so I would say identify things that they like to do. So what I try and do now with agents is say, let's find 2 or 3 things that you like to do with people that you like to be around. That's your sphere. That's your tribe, right? Those are your people. That's what you want to go jump into that and figure out how to communicate with those folks. And so that's a big part of it is identifying where to go with your messaging. And if it's somebody newer, that's where I encourage them, like newer to town, for instance, and they're a newer agent. That's kind of the double whammy, right?
Right.
That's when I tell them, I'm like, hit all the Chamber of Commerce, go talk to the visitor center, go introduce yourself, go talk to you just moved here. You've gone through all the new stuff. You're discovering things every day. Who better than to tell somebody what it's like moving here than you because you're from here? So
Right.
I had one agent that we went over to the visitor center. We got them to keep their business cards there, and they got 2 or 3 deals that year because the visitor center called them and said, "Hey," and they said, "Yeah, I'm just like you. I was a transplant here. Here's what I've learned." Right? That's a boatload of information that for somebody that's been here for a while may not necessarily know a lot of the fun, cool things that are going on that they did because they're out there brand new to the area exploring like crazy. Where I'm kind of going back and forth on my route, right? And so,
Right.
so I think a big part of it is just knowing realistically what you can do consistently that's going to have an impact, and that's the biggest part. Like your newsletters were consistent, so I agree. Like that's that consistency that I would be looking for, and something that you're good at. Which the newsletter you're good at giving information and doing all the different things. So I think that's super important.
Okay.
So.
I think one of the unmentioned that I see a lot of agents struggle with,
Mhm.
and that I was fortunate, and I know you're fortunate enough as well, that I don't think gets talked about is spousal support.
Oh wow, yeah, that's
And
huge.
and and what
That's
I
huge.
mean by that is there's no way I could have what been able to accomplish what I accomplished
If you weren't
without
getting a check in the mail every month.
right.
Wait, no, I'm just kidding. No,
No.
I'm kidding. Oh,
Yeah,
not that spousal
different
support.
type.
I'm sorry.
Different type. But no, because I will say this, Tammy just did a phenomenal job picking up my slack around the house, right? Because I was out working,
Yeah.
trying to grow the business. She and I, we both had okay, so we all have vanity codes, right?
Yeah.
With exit. And so one of my vanity codes for new agents is show me the money. Okay.
Yeah.
Tammy helped me pass the class because she just sat and drilled me. Every step of the way, she was encouraging me. And I remember when I passed the class, it was awesome. So I had to pass the school exam, the state exam, and then get my license. So I passed the school exam, and she bought me a little pen, a little wooden pen.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
When I passed the state exam, she bought me back. This is going to date myself, a day planner, right? A leather back day planner.
Those are sick though, man.
Yeah, they are. And then whenever I went and got my license, she bought me a leather case, briefcase.
Oh, cool.
And in the card, it says, "I'm proud of you, good job, blah, blah, blah. Now go show me the money." Okay.
Nice, dude. I love it.
So we came together and said, "Look, this is my goal."
Hmm.
And she was on board. And I think there's so many agents out there that their spouses aren't on board because they're not ready to, make the sacrifice. Now,
Yeah.
whether this is saying, maybe she's like, I don't want you around as much, so go make some money. I don't know.
No,
Um, but
yeah.
realistically, having that partner that is going to encourage you, that's going to push you, and then understands that vacations. How when you do a vacation, Steve,
Oh gosh. Yeah. I'm
right?
fortunate because my other half is obviously a broker, and so she gets it. She's on a team, so we still keep our deals and things separate.
Right.
But we both know that it's not uncommon if we go on a vacation, we go to a resort, let's say we go to Vegas or wherever, or come down your way. If we're out by the pool, it's highly likely that one of us, if not both of us, has a laptop in our backpack that is
Yep.
going to get pulled out sometime poolside to start working on a deal. And or in the airport or on the airplane. I can't tell you how many times I've been doing emails, planning training sessions, and answering deals from a plane. Sitting there on the floor of the airport, typing away, trying to get a deal off before I get on a flight. It's like you said, having somebody that understands that. And I agree with you because I think a lot of spouses aren't prepared for when that their spouse sits there and says, "Hey, I'm going to get into real estate. I've got this license. Go do this now." The amount of time it does take, and they get selfish with that time, right? They're like, "Hey, I just want you home this weekend,"
Right.
and it's kind of like you mentioned earlier, that Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Well, guess what? Everybody that's working, that's their windows to go out and do things involved in real estate, right? That's when people go out and do that stuff. That's when they have time, or in the evenings when they get off work. So, well, you just got off work as well, right? So it does take, if you want to transition and build a successful real estate career, you are going to have somebody that does understand that. That's a phenomenal point. I didn't even really think about that. So you are chivalry is not dead, my fine sir. There, look at you go. That's pretty
Yeah.
awesome, man. I mean,
Well,
you're trying your best you can to kill it, but that's okay.
right. Well, and the other side of the coin is when I was working a full-time job, I sacrificed my I sacrificed my breaks and my lunches. And what I mean by that is I never took a break and I ate lunch at my desk. And the
Yep.
reason I did that is I went to my supervisor and I'm like, "Hey, look, there may be times when I've got to jump up and take a phone call, right?"
Yeah.
So I would work through my breaks and lunches. And so whenever those times I needed to give attention to one of my clients, and this was during the time that in 2008 when short sales were going on. So
Oh yeah.
so then at that time I would go sit in a conference room on my lunch on the phone with a bank, working a bank over while I'm eating lunch.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was just a lot of sacrifices that have to be made by both you
Oh yeah.
and your
100%.
partner.
Well, and I
Yeah.
had Jen's avatar walk through the corner of the screen there a little while ago, so she popped in. I don't know if you
That's
saw that.
possible. Hopefully she dropped off the 20.
Right. We'll see. We'll see. So, well, hey
Yeah.
man, we're kind of getting near the end of our time here.
All
So
right.
So what are some fine parting words that we should have? So this kind of became like a, hey, I'm a part-time agent with a full-time job and maybe I want to become a full-time agent. What should I do kind of episode.
Yeah, apparently, yeah. Yeah.
Fair. This is
That's
the
the
best part.
furthest thing. That's the furthest thing from where we started out, isn't it?
I I know. I know. Exactly. So, well, yeah. It is. It is. But, that's what I love about it and it's kind of indicative of this business, right? You have to kind of be ready to
Yeah.
kind of change and roll with how things go because it's constantly in flux and it's constantly every no deal is the same. So you want an agent that's pretty savvy, knows how to roll with the punches, can keep themselves calm, cool, and collected, come up with a plan, come up with a way to get you there. And if you're that part-time agent looking to become full-time, dedicate yourself to just one or two simple, consistent practices that can help get you there and definitely have the support at home. Like I agree, that's a big, big deal.
It is. It is. So thank you all for watching. If you have any
Right on.
questions or comments, feel free to reach out to us. Drop a comment in the comment section, like and share as well. If you have any topic that you would like us to destroy, drop that in the comments as well.
Absolutely. I like that part.
Hey, glad
Right
to have
on.
you back, Steve, and we'll catch everyone next week.
Glad to be back. See you, man.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.